Hey there, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what's coming up. One-on-one with the head of the Chicago-based American Library Association, who was named in Time Magazine's most influential list. What a major grant to the Chicago Public Library Foundation will do to help the city's Black History archives thrive. 3 Illinois public universities saw faculty strikes this month. We talk about what's behind the picket lines.
We're going to get behind you and push you, but you have to put the work in.
And St. Leonard's Ministry's holistic approach offers a smoother landing for residents returning from incarceration. All that coming up, but our first story tonight, meet one of Time Magazine's most influential people right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
The first Black woman to lead the Chicago-based American Library Association is being named one of Time Magazine's most 100 influential people of the year. The magazine says Tracie Hall's life's work teaches each of us that the love of libraries and books can free us from hatred and lies, not just for the present generation, but for the liberation of all to come. This comes as the American Library Association reports efforts across the country to ban books nearly doubled in 2022 from the previous year. Joining us now to talk about it all is Tracie Hall, Executive Director of the American Library Association. Tracie, congrats and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Brandis.
Can you believe that line from that I just read from Time Magazine and what they said about you? How did you find out about making the list?
First of all, it's still sinking in. And I definitely know it's not about me. It's really about this moment in time for libraries and librarians and for all of us who are committed to ensuring that the right to read passes on to another generation. But I am still in disbelief. I found out about it in the middle of the night. I was burning the midnight oil like some of us do, and this email comes over the digital transom, and it asked me to verify who I was and my date of birth, and it was from Time 100. And when I investigated and found out that it was real, I was just in shock.
I know you probably get sort of a strange email asking you who you are. And you're
Yes.
like, I don't have to identify myself to you.
Right, exactly.
Glad you did. So you're the first Black woman to head the American Library Association. What does that mean to you?
Well, there's a lot of firsts at the American Library Association. One thing that I think a lot about in terms of honors for Black women is that in 1957, the American Library Association honored a Black sorority, Delta Sigma Theta, for funding mobile bookmobiles throughout the South to fight against segregated libraries. And so there's just a history of people of color in general leading the way when it comes to libraries.
Tell me a little bit about your personal relationship with reading and the library.
Well, I am dedicated to libraries because my grandparents on my maternal side really dealt with and had to navigate low literacy. And so they really pushed me to pursue education. And my grandmother walked with me to the library every day. And so it's really in honor of her and in honor of people like her that the American Library Association is supporting the expansion of literacy outlets all over the country. Right now, we are working on an initiative that would expand library-based literacy instruction. And so I think about my grandmother every day because that work is really important to me, and other work that we do in carceral facilities, et cetera. Those things hit close to home because I grew up in South Central LA. And so a lot of the work I do today was inspired really by my childhood.
We're seeing, as we mentioned across the country, more efforts to ban books and some officials even threatening to shut down libraries.
Yes.
What's at stake here?
What's at stake is that libraries today are the largest provider of not only print materials but digital access. And so if you've ever worked in a library, you know that the people who are queuing up in front of a library an hour or even 2 hours early are people who need access to computers, who need access to textbooks that might be in the library that they can't afford, and they need those things before they start their day. And the thing that I fear, and I know that we won't stand for it, is that if we sit silent while some of this legislation is proposed, it could really eradicate one of the most used public services that we have in our country today.
How is the American Library Association approaching this?
Well, in a variety of ways. The American Library Association was the first national organization to mount an anti-censorship program. I'd encourage everybody to go to uniteagainstbookbans.org and receive their own playbook, how they can organize in their households, in their communities, and in the larger sphere of influence to make sure that we make sure that the notion that free people read freely is not something that we just say, but something that is a reality. Next week, we will be celebrating National Library Week. And the first day, that Monday, is National Right to Read Day, where we're affirming not only does everyone have the right to read, but it's also right to read. And that whole week is dedicated to the notion that libraries offer more than just print. So it's more to the story. We offer all kinds of programs, basic literacy, family literacy, programs for entrepreneurs, art programs, etc.
The role of libraries, it's been expanded in so many ways. And you know, we can talk about like some libraries being places where folks can get Narcan for opioid overdoses, that kind of stuff. How would you describe the role that the library can have in a community?
Simply this, I think that whether it is on a campus, a school, or a university, I believe that the library is a switching station. And when we talk about public libraries, there's about 17,000 public libraries, more public libraries than even McDonald's. I believe that libraries are the community hub of any neighborhood.
Is there more or something different? What can libraries do to better serve the needs of the community?
First, I think we want to make sure that every single person in this country has a library card and is accessing library resources, whether digitally or in person. I think what libraries can continue to do is to engage their communities, to represent their communities. I'm a librarian, and I've been a librarian for about 25 years, and I would encourage anyone who is interested in education with a little bit of social services to think about librarianship as a career as well.
Okay, Tracie Hall, repping the libraries, thank you so much, and congrats again.
Thank you.
Libraries and local history lovers got some good news this week. The Chicago Public Library received a $2 million grant from the Mellon Foundation to digitize and archive materials related to the city's Black history, including items dating from the 1800s to the present day. Here's more on what the grant can do.
That will allow us to process and digitize collections related to Black history that are here at Chicago Public Library, in addition to helping develop more of those types of collections. Also, it will provide a menu of public programming options at all 81 of our branches, and it will allow us to partner with Chicago and Illinois educators to help them use the collections for assignments and curriculum.
I'm proud to live and support teachers in a city with such rich archival resources. This opportunity will support access to those resources, and more importantly, given my work, getting those resources into schools where young people can learn about them, to not only look back towards the past, but as Mayor Lightfoot alluded to, imagine the future.
The grant will allow us to provide a menu of really creative and customized public programming options. One of the things that we certainly noted for our own collection development is, while the Vivian Harsh Research Collection is very represented in terms of Black Southside history, Black people live all over the city of Chicago, and we very much want our collections to be representative of Black people on the West Side, Black people on the North Side. We have queer Black people living all over the city, and those are collections that we don't necessarily have a great deal of documentation for. With this funding also comes our opportunity to give back to the city of Chicago, not just with the programming and with the actual availability of collections, but that we will be able to offer mini grants to researchers, educators, and other types of storytellers interested in telling new stories about Black life. This is our collective history, Black history here in Chicago, especially as Chicago has been the site of so many deeply transformative social movements in this country.
Williams says some of the funds will also be used to offer mini grants to researchers and educators to help tell some of the stories revealed in the archives. Up next, common factors behind public universities striking. A wave of labor actions has swept through Illinois' public universities this month. Faculty have gone on strike at Chicago State, Eastern Illinois, and Governors State universities. All of these schools serve significant populations of Black and brown students, as well as older and lower income students. While agreements have been reached at all three schools, faculty say they share some common factors, namely overworked and underpaid instructors that lead to diminished outcomes for their students. Joining us now are Valerie Goss, Chicago State University Associate Professor and President of the University Professionals of Illinois, Local 4100, Lisa Phillip, Higher Education Reporter for WBEZ Chicago, and Bob Bruno, Professor and Director of the Labor Education Program at University of Illinois School of Labor and Employment Relations. Thanks to all three of you for joining us. I appreciate it. Valerie, let's start with you, please. Yes. What were some of the reasons that the CSU faculty decided to strike?
The CSU faculty have done quite a lot of work. You know, you consider that we've been working through the pandemic. We've worked with our students and laboratories and all sorts of other courses. And we have tried I guess I want to say we started trying to bargain with the institution and see if we could get to some agreement. I think that we began getting to a point, I would say, where we had roadblocks, where we just couldn't move any further. So I think that was one of the major reasons why we needed to go on strike. We were asking for adequate, workloads that were balanced, where we'd be able to do the work that needs to be done for the students and for the community. And then we also were looking for adequate and equity in compensation as well. So because of these, and because it seemed as though the talks were stalling, we decided that we needed to take that next labor step.
Lisa, was that the story at GSU in Eastern Illinois as well?
Yeah, it was very similar in the sense that faculty were asking for more pay and for reduced workloads as well. We've seen public funding for higher education decrease incredibly in the past 2 decades by nearly half when you account for inflation, and that's really, in some situations caused minimizing of salaries, faculty salaries, and reduction of tenured positions. And so you have fewer faculty that are taking on more and more work, and their salaries haven't really kept up with inflation, especially recently where, we've seen inflation skyrocket.
Bob Bruno, you trace some of the funding problems back to the Bruce Rauner administration. What's the relationship between his administration then and the problems we're seeing today?
Well, the years 2015, 2016 were really just terrible years. There were budget impasses. And what it did was it accelerated what is about a 2-decade slide in the level of support for higher education in the state of Illinois. During the Rauner years, without the without the budget approval, we saw schools like Governor State and Chicago State and Eastern suffer significant reductions in enrollment. There were furloughs of large numbers. The allocation that was needed just to maintain operation wasn't forthcoming. And these schools really didn't have rich endowments and other appropriate sources of revenue to make up the differences. And really, since about 2009, we have seen tuitions go up substantially across the system to try to make up for what is about a 49% reduction, controlled for inflation, in the level of state support between 2009 and roughly 2021-22. So it really just aggravated a very difficult situation and really put those teachers in almost an impossible situation to maintain the level of services that they're so passionate to provide.
Valerie, one of the sticking points that you all emphasized was student mental health need. Why was that important for you all?
Well, I think the student mental health need also relates as well to the student emotional need, their ability to be able to speak with faculty. They consult with us. The first person that they turn to generally are the faculty. They turn to the folks that they trust. And we looked at how faculty were helping students and noticed that in order for us to be effective, we really needed to have a balanced workload. We needed to have time to speak with the students, work with them, give them counsel, give them guidance, career advice. We needed that time to be able to do those things. Students get anxious about being able to do all those things. Given all that has transpired, I think the students have needed, and we can see that they needed additional support in this area, emotional and mental health. And those services are available, but we can see that faculty are really the first line, right at the front line, helping the students. So,
Lisa, how do the needs of the students at these universities differ from so-called traditional students?
Yeah, so a lot of these students are students of color, are students from low-income families, so they sometimes need additional supports that, say, your 18-year-old who's fresh out of high school, coming from a very resource background, maybe doesn't need. And a lot of the students that turn to a place like Chicago State or Governor State or Eastern Illinois are students that maybe are bound to their communities in some way, are commuting to campus, don't live in the dorm, and I've talked to several students during these strikes who just really love the small class sizes they've come across. I know that at Chicago State, one of the great things about it is that you have such a diverse faculty serving what is a really it's a predominantly Black student body, and unlike nationally, where the percentage of Black faculty is less than 10%, at Chicago State it's nearly 40%. And I know I talked to one of Dr. Goss's students actually on the picket lines, and she talked about how in high school she was interested in chemistry, but wasn't really sure what she wanted to do coming into Chicago State. And she took a class with Dr. Goss, and she told me, she was like, that was the first time I had seen a Black woman teaching chemistry. And she told herself, I can do it. I know I can do it. And she's been accepted into a PhD program in chemistry at University
a matter
of
of role modeling as well, especially if you've got maybe a high number of first-generation college students. Bob, how do funding decisions affect working conditions for university instructors?
Well, look, and I think you heard from our two other guests that when in fact you don't have sufficient funding, and you can't maintain the proper level of staffing, you're going to increase the number of students per instructor. You're going to ask instructors to take on additional classes in a compressed time. If those teachers are not receiving suitable pay increases, particularly when the cost of living is going up, they're then having to make some really hard choices about, are there other ways to supplement their pay? If you're not on a full-time tenure track progression, but you're hired as a part-time or you're hired as an adjunct, you're going to find yourself trying to juggle positions at different universities. You've got to figure out the logistics of getting from one place to another. You certainly aren't going to have a whole lot of time to do any kind of deep research. And as we heard earlier, what about keeping those office hours? What about that extended time that you want to give to students? What about engaging in campus life? Again, it just places you in just a terrible dilemma.
Ends up being a very heavy load, and of course we're keeping an eye on Northeastern Illinois University. As we know, the faculty there has voted to strike, but they are in a period where they're not walking off the job just yet. But that's where we'll have to leave it. Valerie Goss, Lisa Phillip, and Bob Bruno, thanks to the three of you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, helping people returning from incarceration re-enter their communities.
Where have we been? Where are we at? Where are we going?
Essentially to be able to help anyone and everyone in the community, whether that's through academic support, social emotional learning, or just providing a safe space for youth to be able to be there.
This is the fabric of the neighborhood. You need to take care of the neighborhood. It's an ecosystem.
For the formerly incarcerated, release from prison brings a new set of challenges. Many find themselves facing housing insecurity, difficulty finding a job, and struggling to reintegrate. St. Leonard's Ministries was founded in 1954 as a halfway house for men returning from incarceration. Since then, their mission has expanded to include job training, healthcare, and educational support for reentering men and women. But they say the most important thing they offer their residents is time to heal. As part of WTTW's ongoing initiative, Firsthand Life After Prison, producer Erica Gunderson has this story.
I wear many hats here. So sometimes I'm a counselor, sometimes I'm just an ear for someone to listen to.
As intake and housing manager at St. Leonard's Ministries, David Harris helps people returning from incarceration successfully re-enter their communities. And he says he knows they can do it because he's done it himself.
I came through the program back in 1996 myself. So I've been through substance abuse, I've been homeless, and I've been through the system. But what I did is I chose to change my life through educating myself. And then giving it back now, it's like looking in the mirror.
In the nearly 70 years St. Leonard's has maintained its quiet presence on the West Side, Executive Director Zach Schrantz says the nonprofit has grown far beyond its original mission of providing housing for men exiting incarceration.
We are not just a housing provider. We're not just a workforce development provider. We're not just a mental health provider. We're not just a physical health provider. And we're not just substance abuse and recovery supports. We're all of those things. There's just so many obstacles that get put in the way of our men and women as they become returning residents. So we provide all of our services from housing to all of our workforce programs, free of charge.
Though St. Leonard's offers many kinds of support, it begins with housing, both transitional and permanent. David Rosa says the 42 furnished units at St. Andrew's Court on the campus allow residents to ease into independence at their own pace.
It also established the fact that if they've been here over a year with us, and they've been paying rent and everything like that, it helps in regards to when they go out there and apply for an apartment out there, that they can use us as a reference. And there's a lot of guys that get here, never been on a lease before, never had an apartment, where they can come in and they can feel that they're home. And that's what the whole thing was about.
And job training is just steps away at the Barlow Center. Chef instructor Golden Moore left a career in fine dining to teach a comprehensive culinary skills course at St. Leonard's.
In addition to us learning about food, we also learn how to be professional, how to respect each other, how to encourage and root for each other. Because sometimes you never know what a person is dealing with or whatever their background is. So we're more like a family here.
A 14-week construction skills course taught by Jonathan Wilson prepares participants for trade apprenticeships and industry jobs.
We're learning to frame a house. So, well, to build a house from the ground up, we're learning framing, electrical, plumbing, roofing. They leave well enough where they can work for like housing management companies to become handyman. Like it's a wide range of ways that they can go.
St. Leonard's leadership says the proof their holistic approach works is recidivism rates that are a fraction of the state average.
There's a growing recognition that society is better if we figure out better ways to welcome and incorporate returning residents.
And we're here to help each other be successful in our journey.
Someone said this at a last graduation. He said he was broken when he came here, and I know what he mean by that, you know. And you can be broken, but then you got a place to heal.
For Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
And you can find more on all St. Leonard's has to offer on our website. And you can see much more about life after prison at WTTW.com/firsthand. And that's our show for this weekend. But don't forget, on Monday at noon, you can tune in to a virtual Voices community conversation. I'll be speaking with community leaders about the impact of the 2023 Chicago mayoral election and expectations of Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson. To RSVP, you can visit WTTW.com/events. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.